Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So I wrote this very funny introduction to this sermon in the hopes that I could bring some levity to this morning. So I'm going to plow through the funny introduction, but you should know my heart's not in it. It's because the introduction is... I'm just going to go through with it. People often complain about the Jewish community's alphabet of organizations. So there's the UJA, there's JDC, there's the WJC, there's JCRC, there's the USCJ, and so on and so on. And we've included ourselves in that because we're known as GHC. And I thought it was funny, and unfortunately, the only letters that continue to come through my mind as we think of organizations are ATF, SWAT, and FBI. And so my funny introduction kind of went down the tubes. But I'm going to try anyways because there's still a very funny introduction here. Less am I concerned with the letters, the alphabet of organizations. I am more obsessed with titles. The new outbreak in titles that I think are quite interesting. It used to be president and director. Then they added executive director and CEO. And I was fine with CEO. It sounds so commanding and important. Chief executive officer. It sounds so important. Then the job, I think, became too much for the CEO, and so they hired a COO. And when that job got to be too big for those two at the top, they hired someone known as a CFO. And then apparently the job was too big for the CEO, the COO, and the CFO, so they hired a CIO, Chief Intelligence Officer. And that person was just as good as the CFO and the COO, but just lacked the same interpersonal skills. Because the CIO used to be the IT guy, which was differentiated, of course, from the people who were in the sales department, who had managers and regional managers, project managers, and directors of sales. Boy, do I love titles. So much so that when I became a rabbi, I started out as an assistant rabbi. And after 3 years, I asked for a promotion, and the senior rabbi said to me he'd be happy if I became the associate rabbi. After all, the first 3 letters were the same, which was an indication of the job I was doing. But there are visiting lecturers, there are adjunct professors, there are associate professors, there are full professors, there are rabbis, senior rabbis, solo rabbis, and just rabbis. And we love to parse out our titles as if they mean something. Don't get me wrong, for many years I was motivated by titles. I remember my first job and how great it felt to be called a rabbi in the first place. But I have to be honest with you, my favorite title is one I've just recently acquired, and that is Saba. We as people have always loved titles, and that has led us, unfortunately, to unnecessary conflict throughout the ages. Who got them, and how long have they been a way of consolidating and concentrating power? Just a few examples before I really get going today. Just this year, the cantorate made a bold move from calling their cantors invested to calling their cantors ordained. And that's an important move because previously it was a way of rabbis saying they were more important because we were ordained and they were only invested. So the important move that the cantorate made this year was to say the cantors are equal clergy with rabbis. And so just as I'm ordained, so is our cantor. Because this forever parsing of language does lead to a sense of inequality that's damaging, both to us and to the people we serve. For years, we fought in our movement about who could be called a rabbi at all. And the Orthodox still holds on to that, not allowing many females to be called rabbis, even though they act in the exact same role in their communities. But this is nothing new. This is just an indication of a history that is fraught with titles. Who is the head of a tribe? Who is a judge? And who ultimately gets to hold the brass ring of being a priest, a Kohen? Long before we ever adopted the role of priest in our nation, it was a long sought-after prize as a title that people held. That's why this morning's opening starts with Vayishma Yitro Kohen Midyan. That Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, was a priest in Midyan. He still carried a title with him, even though it had nothing to do with our people. He had a title, and we respected it. Yitro, the priest of Midyan, Moses' father-in-law, heard all that God had done for the Jewish people and how God had brought the Jewish people out of Egypt, and he's going to instruct us on how to build a judicial system. Not only are we introduced to Yitro as Moses' father-in-law, we get his title, a title that I might parenthetically remind you is one that Moses never gets. Moses. Lo kam b'Yisrael od navi k'Moshe. Moses, the greatest prophet, never becomes a priest. Of course, he is attacked later by Korach, who believes that Moses appointed his brother priest in order to consolidate familiar power, not unlike if the mayor of New York would appoint his brother chief of security. While Yitro is not Jewish, his title still is impressive. While Yitro's faith has been rejected by Moses and our people since the time of Abraham, he still is honored with a title. We love titles and we recall it. Then Yitro says to Moses, you need help, so let's create a layer of people. We'll call them judges. Another title that would cement social hierarchy. But it's the title of Kohen in this morning's Parsha that has me a little twisted. Just after the thunderous moment of revelation, Moses says, don't come close to the mountain. V'gam hakohanim hanigashim el Adonai yitkadshu pen yifrotz bahem Adonai, that even the priests shouldn't come forward to the mountain. And I scratch my head because there is no priesthood yet. The priesthood doesn't come into existence until much later when we build the tabernacle. And we have to appoint people to do service in the tabernacle. After the extraordinary history-shaping, nation-creating experience, God, through Moses, warns, don't get too close, don't ascend the mountain no matter how much you want to, not even the Kohanim. But we don't even have Kohanim yet. But let's recall the moment before this thunderous revelation, where God says through Moses to the Jewish people, "Va'atem tihiyu mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh." You're going to be a nation of priests and a holy nation. Not just an individual group, but everybody gets to be a priest. Everybody gets to be holy. You're all Kohanim, says the text. You're all priests. But I guess if everybody gets to be one, then there's no value in being one. Who wants to be the hall monitor if everybody's a hall monitor? So God says, what is most important is not to be a Kohen, but to be a Goy Kadosh, a holy nation. The entire phrase, Atem tiyu mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh, means be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Be holy. Who cares what your title is? Who cares what people call you? Be holy. It doesn't matter what title you have. It matters what your job is. And your job is to be holy. We're not better, but we do have a job to do, and that job is to be holy. Chaim ibn Attar, Chaim ben Moshe ibn Attar, also known as the Or Chaim, living in the late 18th century, says something beautiful. He imagines the way the world works in a metaphysical way. Ve'amar Adonai ki otam yaseh Adonai b'makom kohanim v'kodashim ha'elyonim. He says, imagine. There used to be the way the world worked was God was on high, and then there was this level of angels who did the work of making sure the world remained holy. And at the moment of revelation, the Or Chaim reminds us that job was transferred. That we all became responsible. We took the place of those angels. And we are now the ones who are considered holy. God's telling the Israelites that as of now, I'm substituting the Jewish people for the celestial servants known as the Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. We're now the holy people. My father used to say every morning when he woke us up, Kum lavodas habore. Time to get up and do the service of the Almighty. It's time to get up and do the work of our Creator. I can't imagine why I became a rabbi, but guess what? You don't have to be a rabbi to do God's work. As the Or Chaim continues, our job is critical to the universe, to our world, to our global community. Liburei nitzatzot hakdusha. That our job is to go around grabbing onto those little sparks of holiness that exist in the world and gathering them up together. The task of the Jewish people is to attract the sparks and fuse them into a solid body of holiness, says the Or Chaim. This past Shabbat in Colleyville reminds us of the many fractures and the deep hatred in our world. Remember, as I've said so many times and so many have said before me, we, the Jewish people, are the canaries in the mines of society. Our task can't be to alert the world to the hatred that exists and that is often foisted on us. Our job has to continuously be to bring light to the world, to bring holiness in the world, to be holy. In the end of the day, I do love walking through our preschool and hearing the children say, "There's the rabbi." And in other contexts, my heart is warmed when I hear people say, "He's my rabbi." But I hope it's because I've earned it, not because that's what it says on the stationery, or because they really can't remember my name. This past week, we observed Martin Luther King Day. Martin Luther King was a pastor, and he held a doctorate. Yet he was rarely referred to as doctor or pastor. He's just known by his name and his contribution. You see, when your contribution is so significant, the title doesn't matter, just your name does. Every year, the JCC coordinates a social action project in his name, and this year they gave out T-shirts for people who volunteered. And on the T-shirt, it said, Mensch. Truthfully, I don't think a mensch would wear a shirt telling everyone they're a mensch. But no matter, it too is a title. And maybe it's one that we all ought to strive for. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with Musaf, page 184. Chatzi Kaddish, please rise.